only works if we're doing aggregated voting.
Yeah. I
So,
think what we could do is effectively aggregate the votes on the back end. So we just treat the votes from the address as one voter. But what I would like us to do is include the amount of voice credits spent somehow. So we want people to use all their voice credits. So I think people who use their voice effectively. The other thing that I thought might be interesting to explore, did people leave an opinion? Is a vote more valuable if it came bundled with an opinion? That is a behavior we want to incentivize. We want more people to leave a good, nuanced, thoughtful opinion with every vote. Can we design a vote mining algorithm that incentivizes people to do that?
I think it's only qualitative, right? Because you cannot automatically decide whether this comment is cool. People can just post some poems in or whatever.
What we can do is, there is, however, a binary. Did they leave a comment for that vote?
Or even what was the length of the comment? But as soon as that metric gets known, then people can like just fill it in.
Yeah, just chat.
Yeah, I mean, it's an adversarial thing almost, whereas you've got people just trying to milk the system and not contribute anything, and we have to automate things because otherwise we can't really easily interact with a large community. I can imagine in the future some kind of comprehension test of what the issue was. You have to and maybe it's somehow randomized and has a time limit on it, so you can't easily cheat.
I can tell you where I think it. So in future iterations of Influence, there will be the ability to comment on these. So other voters can come in and comment in a threaded manner under each of these. Yeah, I agree with this, Nick, blah, blah, blah. Subsequent people commenting on your comment could factor into that as a quality of comment. If you generated debate, then your point of view was more valuable.
Sorry. I just like reporting spam and that. If I say Nick's comment here is spam, and I just mark that, and enough people, we meet a threshold of people that say it is spam, then we can factor out the spam ones.
Or you can attack other people's comments if they're brilliant and you don't like their opinions. You can also report them as.
Works, right? You just silence your opponents by
calling them.
Yeah.
A friend of mine used to get Facebook groups closed by just posting a lot of porn there.
Yes. So it's a bit of a rabbit hole, this one. I think for this vote, let's see if we can, by next week, add the nuance of did voter leave comment and add an additional incentive weighting for those people. Does that feel like a good idea? Yes. So one of the things that we can debate for the next quarter, what the next iteration's vote mining strategy is. So if people know that, say, 1.8 million tokens were given out to influence voters, it will encourage people to turn up and vote for influence votes, which is what we want. Then in the DAO, we can monitor the votes as they come in and discuss what kind of voting strategies and what kind of voting dialogue and discourse was good, and how we incentivize that for the next drop. So this one, we can have a very simple one. Anyone who, essentially number of votes on influence, did they leave a comment? And then that dices pro rata up the airdrop. Next time round, we can add all sorts of nuance. One of the things that I thought might be cool to do is have essentially tag the votes as low, medium, and high priority. So for example, a meme vote might be low priority, and like the airdrop vote we've just had might be high priority, and that weights the amount of tokens that get distributed to the votes. But yeah, that's a kind of function for Influence 2.0. All right, I want us to wrap this up in 20 minutes. So I'm going to go through these pretty quickly, and let's try and thrash out dialogically what we think are the pros and cons for these things. I have to say DAO leaders is the one that was my top priority. You can see my votes here. I had 7 on DAO leaders. I'm thinking here about the future. We get to signal that leadership is a priority to us. In my head, the thing that will make us most successful in the long run is having a treasury that pays a large amount of people to function as leaders within this. I've said, yeah, it's one of the most important aspects of the DAO space, and we can lead with it. I think I want us to, I'm going to spend quite a lot of time next year running a DAO leadership course with the express view of finding more of these people, and don't necessarily even need to work for us or become DAO leaders for us. They can go be DAO leaders for somewhere else. But I think leadership's a really important thing. So I'd be very strongly behind that. Any other comments on DAO leadership? Agree, disagree with that?
I'll be biased if I speak.
I don't know, the DAO leaders.
I think it makes a lot of sense to me.
Yeah, now at the moment, there isn't a huge amount. I think 3D team are going to be in there. We're looking at 7 or 8 people, but it will be more people next time round. But yeah, I think there's people who've lived this project with us. And I have to be clear, I'm not in this bucket. We are out, me, UV, Naomi are outside of that, the Senate group, and are outside of that bucket. So this isn't, I'm not getting any of these. In fact, I might do for some of the voting stuff, but
is the Senate group not one of the list here?
No, we're outside of this. We're incentivized outside of this with a bucket of tokens that is not part of the treasury. So we're not included in the. There's a line between one. In fact, one of the interesting things, and we'll talk about this more next week. We have a treasury that we essentially autocratically control, and we use that to pay people. Like the DAO leaders do get a stipend each week that are paid out of what we call the development treasury. We pay about 15 developers from that. We pay our PR company out of, we pay salaries out of that. And we're not asking the DAO's permission to spend this pot of money, because it would kill us if we, and some DAOs ridiculously try and do this. I was speaking to a guy last night who was worried about setting up his DAO because he was talking to a mate who has to ask the DAO's permission to go to conference, and he was literally begging the voters who were saying, no, you can't go to Lisbon and represent the project because that £3,000 is sell pressure on the token. So that's the kind of bike shedding hell we're trying to avoid with that. But just take it as read that we're not incentivizing ourselves here with this distribution. So yeah, any other thoughts on DAO leaders? I would be happier if this was higher. It's third higher. I think the other way to look at it is, so OG's here, fourth. I don't know which ones are the fourth ones. Our fourth one, citizens. Anyone with citizens, 10%. DAO leaders, 11%, citizens, 10%. Citizens have not had to do much apart from sit on their arse and mint an FET ID. DAO leaders have been working their guts off week in, week out. Is it fair that they get the same? There was one thing that struck me as maybe we merge, and that is this OG and citizen thing. I think these two are the same.
That's what I was thinking. Yeah. Would give them the geometric mean of their percentages.
If we were stuck with this one, we could do. But I'm thinking in the final vote, we just citizen and out. So essentially delete this one. Since anyone who's in that Ethereum citizens channel
has to have an ID.
Has to have, it's the same people. Is anyone particularly aggrieved if we remove that one?
I feel like it's pretty good also because it's like, if we're thinking, like you said, like long term, what are we trying to incentivize or so that people build this DAO? Like, oh, they're doing the influence votes and this and that. Like an OG thing, it's like, I can't be an OG. I just missed the start.
Yeah, it feels a bit insidery, doesn't it? The other one, are people happy with this one? The definitions of these. So supporter, I think, if you imagine this running for a long time, I would love to see Twitter full of our little voting squared emotes. It works as a thing. Worked well for Olympus DAO. It's working well for Avalanche at the moment with the little red triangles.
Yeah, you can run whole color revolutions on Twitter with this sort of thing.
Yeah, and it's just great. I see people like Al that has it on it. I see when Al likes something, it comes up on Twitter. I think it's just a really good thing. Not a huge bucket of tokens in here. We could decide to take it higher if we wanted to. But yeah, and essentially that if you have done this and haven't done it yet, post your Twitter account in the channel, which has the little voting squared icon on it. What's it called, Ksenia?
Sorry, what?
The account with the channel where you show people you've got the little voting squared thing on Twitter.
Good question. I'll take a look.
I think it's called the Quad Squad.
It's called the Quad.
Yes, the Quad Squad.
Is this an incentive to get more people to do it as well? Because if we're saying, look, do it over this next week and you get into the spot, it doesn't hurt.
Exactly. That is the case.
Can we get Glenn Whale to add this to?
Glenn, do you want to be in our airdrop? Yeah. Do you want $20 worth of tokens, Glenn?
But I'm thinking it's cool because we're not shilling like just our project. We're shilling quadratic voting, which is nice. It's not like Avalanche stealing a little triangle for themselves. Yeah.
Yeah, I think so too. People will see it and think, "Ooh, what's that?" And it's not necessarily. Yeah, it's a broader thing. I'm really happy with it. I think it was Dom's idea, and it's a really good one.
It says supported the project for a long period of time, and then it just has an emoji next to it. I think we could make it really explicit. Has put this emoji in their social media.
Completely agree.
Or on a tattoo.
Yeah, you get double plus good if you get it tattooed on your arse.
Is this any social media? Have we changed from Twitter to LinkedIn? Anything else?
To be honest, I only live on Twitter at the moment, but if someone wants to change their Instagram to it, that will count as well, I think. There's some work to do on collecting data. This one, we need a list of people who have come to. Does 3 DAO calls feel like a good threshold for this?
Then you think the threshold number of calls should be higher?
My only feeling of that is we don't have good data on it. We don't have like good attendance data. It's going to be like basically from memory, so we can't really enforce it in a sense. And yeah, we could be, is it 3 or 4? And yeah, and it just gets a little bit.
I think another column to add to this, which we may be hard to do right now, but maybe for the future, would be just the number of people in that group. Because if it's like, for example, if only one person completed a task from the job board, allocating 10% doesn't exactly feel fair.
Yes, yeah. There's going to be people who get outsized rewards just by being scarce in number.
And it also creates a kind of like another invisible incentive is like, okay, you could do something with high impact, but that a lot of other people are already doing, which is actually good. We want lots of people doing high impact things. If there's a low impact thing, but that nobody's doing, then you can go there. And
so there's kind of like incentive. If let's say there's 4 people that have completed job boards task, which is about around where it is. These people would get like a couple of 100,000 tokens each, which is not a bad airdrop, and actually doesn't feel too bad. Now, if what would then happen is the people who did the job boards tasks got the highest amount of tokens, or individually for doing that, then doesn't that encourage people in the next round to do job boards?
Yeah, I don't know. This is an interesting topic because it's like Simpson's paradox, where you can like by choosing how you subgroup the data, you can create like opposite trends. So I don't know. I'm not sure what the right choice would be. I think making it clear how many people are in it would help other people think about it.
And I think what we can do is collect that data in advance of. I don't think we're going to be able to collect in advance of the vote. We can do it during the vote. We're going to need a spreadsheet creating that has addresses, a tab for each of these with addresses of who's in it or who's not. It's a binary for the most part. Are you a supporter, yes or no? Are you a citizen, yes or no? And then there's weightings for these 2.
Yeah, and we'll have to create that spreadsheet to do the airdrop anyway. So
yeah, exactly. Yeah,
I think it might. Also creating the spreadsheet also makes us aware if there's any data acquisition problems. If there's certain data, we just don't even we don't have a way to actually figure it out. In which case, we shouldn't allocate tokens to them.
Yes, but yeah, I'm happy at the moment for it to not. It's just an extra layer of complexity in the algorithm to include people in the number of people in the airdrop in the weighting. I think we can nuance it. We don't have to get it right first time.
You're right. Yeah, it's better to just get it done, I think.
Yes, exactly. Word spread. I think this is people who've been completing our little spread the word task. I wouldn't mind seeing this a little bit higher, actually. There hasn't been a load of people doing it, so it'll end up as a good airdrop for people who have. There might need to be waiting for commitment in there. It might be that if you're one of the people in there, you might want to think about how this airdrop piece works. But again, that feels pretty sensible. Introducer, there's a few people who I think could fall into this bucket. Again, I want to really incentivize this because the value that one person can bring to the network, for example, there's one chap in particular I'm thinking about here who introduced us to the Stoner Cats. He said to Mac over at Big Head, you need to speak to Nick about finance.vote. And that has been our sort of biggest partnership event this year, and he's brought immense value to the network. And I think if he got the entire tranche, I'd be happy. And in the future, we want people to go, hey, why don't you go and talk to finance.vote? They've got the tools that you need. So again, I want there to be a kind of good reward for that one in this one. And what are anyone's thoughts on that one? Do people think that would it encourage you to go and introduce us to people? And should it just be, does it lead to a DAO alignment?
Founders fees are always welcome. I think that in any system, it's always welcome.
I agree.
And the DAO alliance is a nice, clean decision mechanism. You're like, it doesn't. If we say just introduce a key stakeholder, feels a little bit more gray, and I don't know who's important, who's not.
Hey guys, can I just approach on a broader topic here that I'm listening to you guys, and it seems recurring, which is abusing the system. My mind wanders off and I start thinking of people creating characters for role-playing games. And no matter what system you choose, there's always the min-maxers and people that are just there to find a workaround to abuse the system. And especially given the level of intelligence within this niche that you guys are in, it's unavoidable that somebody is going to find a way to exploit it. So I think it's really about having an ethical code behind this, that if somebody is caught intentionally abusing the system with malice, that person then is void of that payment or that benefit, because I think essentially this needs to go around on the basis that people are here to help and because they mean well and they have values that are in line with what the project is doing.
I think this is a really interesting, I think about this a lot. I really dislike slash mechanisms for anything outside of.
It's police. It's police. Yeah. So do we want police, or can we tolerate certain malicious behavior unless it breaks the system?
So this is it. I played these games out in my head many times, and when you introduce, I had a big bust up with someone over this a few years ago, who wanted to introduce all sorts of slashing mechanisms into a token economics game. And it was emblematic of his attitude. If he was a leader,
a rather harsh personality,
he would he would be a dictator of the worst kind. Like, it's almost give someone the power to generate a token economy, will show you their governance of, show you their intentions of how they would govern people.
It's like how people treat dogs and how people design token economies.
There's a definite alignment. No.
Well, I think that it doesn't necessarily mean it's a police. I do think it's important to have limits.
Yeah.
And from a parental point of view, I'm not saying I'm going to police my son, but he knows where the line is.
Yeah, and I think where I think it comes into is we're trying to build systems that are tolerant of these abuses. They've produced the right outcomes, even in this adversarial. That's when you've got a good token economy. It is designed in such a way that it is attack resistant enough that the attackers can only attack it in a way that is minimal, or it costs them a fantastic amount of money.
Right, this is what crypto economics is all about. Bitcoin doesn't have the police built in. In fact, it explicitly coded it as a peer-to-peer network. So
yes,
but there's very strong boundaries in it.
Yeah, and this is where like POS systems do have slashing dynamics. because they don't have the real world energy expenditure, the kind of the real cost of inputs. So you have to have this kind of slashing dynamic in it. Essentially the police, if you like, of this is if Senate have to veto it because someone has broke the game, someone has come in and broke the game, we can just say, okay, this vote is invalid because someone managed to find an attack that we didn't see coming. I prefer that than individualized account deletion, if you like.
I think, was it Fabs who was asking this question, right? Fabs, I think you're just relatively new to crypto economics, so this idea is that some asshole just comes in to break my system. You just want to punch them. So I think more you spend time in this paradigm of crypto economics, you gravitate more towards, okay, I just build a resilient system, and if like more organic and like virus and bacteria come in and they just cannot break the system. So it's not about like singling out assholes.
It's anti-fragile.
It's anti-fragile, and there is many assets. It comes right down to the kind of hacks in DeFi and all that sort of stuff, where there's quite a few people who think, look, if you broke the system, it's fair. It's like this all is fair in love and crypto.
Someone defined crypto economics as like a science about distribution of goods and services in digital goods and services in adversarial environments, something like that.
Yes. Yeah, that's exactly what it is. And you can have slashing dynamics in adversarial environments, as is the case with Ethereum proof of stake, for example. In social games, it feels like it could lend to this really toxic environment of people going, he should be slashed, he should be slashed. You know what I mean? I just don't want to open that door unless we really have to. And I actually think. Go ahead.
Basic psychology. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
Well, I just think it creates a kind of dictator position that then all the power-hungry gremlins will want to come occupy.
Yeah, it could create it. It implies there is a decision maker of who should be slashed.
In psychology, I think it's proven, or at least agreed upon, that incentives, positive incentives,
Yes.
are much more effective in producing behavior that you'd like to see. And since this airdrop is mostly based around creating certain types of behaviors, I would say the counter to that is if you weigh the actions that are most positive and have most influence, if you weigh those heavier, but also weigh, for example, I find it a bit hard to explain, so I'll take voting as an example. I don't know if this was discussed yet, but if you weigh the action voting, also the amounts of votes that a certain account has produced or has voted, then at that point, it's really hard to game the system because you have to have been there for a while. You have to have had a lot of interactions with the voting system. So if somebody decides to game, it's going to be really costly for them. What I'm trying to say is I think it's much more effective to incentivize the positive behaviors that you'd like instead of slash down the negative behaviors.
Yeah, I think I would generally agree with that. And I think the kind of nuance here is what are the conditions? Because if we don't express the conditions precisely enough, or even if we do it too narrowly, which is almost like too precisely, then it's like game design, right? If you like make a game for millions of people to play online and then people stop playing it if it feels, if you just play as this character and you play this strategy, you always win. And then it's not that fun. And now it's not just about fun, it's also about money being at stake. So I think two things. One, we should endeavor to get it right, or at least get it good, to try to make it not obviously cheatable. And then the other thing is we're going to continue updating it. It's a gnomic game, so we're going to iterate on it as time goes on, so we don't have to get it perfect.
Yeah.
100%. And some structures are objectively better than others. So if you can, like, Liberty Gold was like a crappy first draft of Bitcoin, and then they just arrested all the founders and then put them in jail for life. And it's like, okay, that's how that game turned out.
Well, I think it's really important to have the fail-safe, because especially at the nascency of this, we're going to make a lot of mistakes.
Yes.
Yeah.
And we do have, which is this kind of like Senate veto, if you like, which again was like a second layer of consensus. We're not going to do things that everyone disagrees with. It'll be an obvious the game has been broken by someone intervention. We're not going to quibble over minor percentage changes on. So yeah, we have that protection. And I think it's one of the major things in the DAO space that people haven't fully got their heads around yet, where you'll find people pushing for like absolute permissionless DAOs from day one. And it's honestly really foolhardy, because all you're doing is exposing every DAO participant who's holding tokens to the risk of someone breaking the system and ending the game. So as far as possible, you need fallbacks. Go on, Ksenia.
I wanted to say Bitcoin wasn't completely permissionless because no one cared. Like it existed, like it wasn't attacked because no one gave a shit. So it could be iterated.
Yes, and there was an inflation bug in it at one point, and no one really gave a shit because hardly everyone was using it. And
I remember it's forked. I think it forked once as well, uncontrollably, and it got fixed. But it just was before anyone cared.
Yeah, exactly. So I think we've got a good game here. I think for one, just to wrap up, I'll try and summarize our thoughts here today, or the team can. We've made some minor additions. What's going to happen is these percentages will bump around one more time based on the conversation we've had today, and we'll set up another iteration of the vote tomorrow, and essentially the numbers that lie in a week's time will be the ones that end up in the airdrop distribution. In that time, we need to get a spreadsheet up, populate it with everyone's addresses that fall into these buckets. We want to do that quickly enough that people can review the spreadsheet and say, hey, I put my voting squared thing on my Twitter and you haven't seen it. And in fact, it gives people a week to do it. It also gives people a week to maybe produce some content if they want to be in the content creator bucket. It gives people a week to do the spread the word campaign, etc., etc. So there's a last week for people to do the stuff that's in, but we'll open the vote tomorrow with the aggregated vote strategy. And I would really like for that to be the bang. That's the distribution.
One thing that's bothering me just a little bit is what's happening to that last 1%.
Oh, this is because this was on 1%. It'll add up to 100. It was because this was in error.
Sure.
It should be minus 1%. When we do the vote, it'll balance to 100.
This might have been discussed, but I might have missed it. Is there a weighting to the amount of votes that an ID has made, or is it just one vote?
Yes, there is. So both in markets and influence votes.
All right.
There's a weighting, but there's a weighting in a sense that if someone's done 1,000 votes, they don't get 1,000x the reward. It tails off, right?
Yeah.
It actually biases people who've voted a small number of times to start with, which I think is a nice incentive to maybe reactivate those voters that came and voted a few times a few months ago and then never came back. So yeah, there is a weighting parameter to it. In fact, what we'll be doing is debating exactly how those algorithms play out over the next week.
Nice. Thanks.
All right. So yeah, I thought that was a really great call. I'm happy largely with where this is at the moment. We'll do another vote next week. And look, if we crack this, I think this is a huge step forward in the DAO space. I think we've got a diversified, action-based, prospective airdrop system. It's not just a one-off thing from an automated thing. It's something that could be handed off to governance, where we can debate how to issue treasury assets to all the people that work in the network for all sorts of stuff, for open-ended social work. I think this is cool stuff. I'm happy with where it is. So thanks, everyone.